"There's a body in the vault," the girl blurted out to the millionaire in the secret room. Then they open the mansion's giant vault and discover something that shocks even the cops. A faint meow echoed through the gardens of Blackwood Manor like a desperate plea for help. Willow Hayes, all of 4 years old, her life already marked by the harshness of the streets of Savannah, stopped when she heard the sound. Her dirty, tattered clothes stood in stark contrast to the impeccable elegance of the manicured lawn that stretched before her. The girl had scaled the low stone wall following a tabby cat that was limping, leaving a trail of blood on the cobblestone path. "Kitty, you're hurt," she murmured, crouching beside the injured animal that had hidden beneath a century-old rosebush. Willow possessed a peculiar sensitivity to the suffering of others, a trait that made her special even amidst the brutality of her life on the streets. Her quiet determination allowed her to face situations that would intimidate adults, while her natural curiosity led her to ask questions that often made people uncomfortable. The cat tried to move away, but its hind legs weren't responding properly. Willow slowly reached out, speaking softly to calm the animal. It was then that a deep voice cut through the afternoon silence. "What are you doing in my yard?" Montgomery Blackwood emerged from the shadows of the trees like an imposing figure. At 52, the businessman carried the weight of a loneliness he had chosen to embrace after losing his wife 3 years prior. Owner of the largest chain of hardware stores in coastal Georgia, he had built his fortune with unwavering determination, but financial success had failed to fill the emptiness that consumed his nights. Willow looked up at him without showing fear, a reaction that surprised Montgomery. Most people were intimidated by his presence, but this little girl stared at him with a seriousness that seemed far beyond her years. "The kitty's hurt, mister. He needs help," she said in a firm voice, pointing to the injured animal. Montgomery observed the scene with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. He wasn't accustomed to having his property trespassed upon, especially by a street urchin who clearly didn't belong in that environment. His first reaction was to call someone to remove the girl, but something in her determination made him hesitate. "How did you get in here?" he asked, examining the wall around the property. "I climbed over there," Willow replied, indicating a section of the wall where some stones jutted out, creating a kind of natural ladder. "The kitty went through there first. I just followed him." The straightforward honesty of the response caught Montgomery off guard. He was used to people who lied or tried to manipulate him for their own gain, but this child spoke with a disconcerting transparency. At that moment, Agnes Dubois appeared from the main house. The 48-year-old housekeeper had worked for the Blackwood family for 2 decades, having witnessed both the moments of happiness and the deep sadness that had marked the mansion. Agnes possessed deep maternal instincts that she had never been able to fully exercise, as she had no children of her own. Her primary motivation was to maintain order and peace in the house, protecting Montgomery from anything that might further disturb his fragile emotional state. "Mr. Blackwood, I saw movement in the garden and—" Agnes stopped when she noticed Willow's presence. Her eyes filled with an instant maternal concern when she saw the girl's condition. "She's trespassing," Montgomery explained, but his voice lacked its usual harshness. Agnes approached Willow carefully, noting the child's pallor and the marks of malnutrition on her small face. "Goodness, when was the last time you had something to eat, dear?" Willow thought for a moment before answering. "Yesterday morning I found a piece of bread near Mr. Henderson's bakery." The revelation caused a pang in Agnes's chest, and she automatically reached out to touch the girl's face. Montgomery observed the interaction with a strange feeling growing in his chest, a mixture of discomfort and something he couldn't identify. "The kitty's bleeding," Willow insisted, redirecting attention to the injured animal. "Can you help him?" Montgomery looked at the cat, then at the girl, and finally at Agnes. The housekeeper had tears in her eyes, clearly touched by the situation. He knew that she would judge him harshly if he simply sent the child away without even offering some help. "Agnes, "Take the cat to the kitchen and see what you can do for him," Montgomery said after a long silence. "And bring something for the girl to eat." "And after?" Agnes asked, knowing that her boss avoided getting involved with issues that might create emotional bonds. Montgomery stared at Willow again. The girl watched him with a silent expectation, as if she knew that this moment would define much more than just the fate of an injured cat. There was something in her eyes that awakened memories he preferred to keep buried, reminders of a time when he still believed in the possibility of starting a family. "We'll see later," he replied, a response that surprised even himself. Willow smiled for the first time since entering the garden, a small but genuine smile that lit up her tired face. She carefully picked up the cat, speaking softly to reassure it, and followed Agnes toward the house. Montgomery remained in the garden for a few minutes after they went inside, looking at the small footprints that Willow had left in the damp earth. For the first time in 3 years, the mansion didn't seem completely empty. A dangerous feeling began to sprout in his hardened heart, and he didn't know whether he should nurture it or fight it. Inside the spacious kitchen, Agnes gently cleaned the cat's wounds, while Willow ate a sandwich with a voracity that betrayed days of hunger. The girl watched Agnes's every move with attention, asking questions about the kitchen utensils and commenting on the size of the house. "This house is really big," Willow said between bites. "How many people live here?" "Just Mr. Blackwood and me," Agnes replied, applying a makeshift bandage to the cat's paw. "And why such a big house for just 2 people?" Willow asked, with the typical curiosity of a child. The simple question hit Agnes like a well-aimed arrow. It was a question she had been asking herself for years, especially on quiet nights when she walked through the empty halls of the mansion. The house had been built to house a large family, but now it served only as a monument to its owner's loneliness. "Sometimes people need space to think," Agnes replied diplomatically. Willow nodded as if the explanation made perfect sense, but her perceptive gaze suggested that she understood more than she let on. There was a sharp intelligence behind those dark eyes, forged by the need to survive on the streets and the ability to read people quickly. When Montgomery entered the kitchen an hour later, he found a scene that left him deeply disturbed. Willow was sitting on the floor, gently playing with the now medicated cat, while Agnes watched her with a maternal smile that he hadn't seen in years. The atmosphere of the house had completely changed with the girl's presence, as if she had brought with her a vital energy that had been absent for a long time. "Is the cat going to be okay?" he asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone. "Yes. It was just a few superficial cuts," Agnes replied. "He should make a full recovery in a few days." Willow looked up at Montgomery with obvious gratitude. "Thank you for helping the kitty, mister." The simplicity of the thank you touched something deep in Montgomery's heart. He hadn't received genuine gratitude in a long time, only self-serving flattery from people who wanted something from him. This child, who had nothing to offer beyond her honesty, was being more sincere than any of the business associates he dealt with daily. "It's getting dark," he said, looking out the window. "Where are you going to sleep tonight?" Willow shrugged with a naturalness that was heartbreaking. "I always find a place. There's an awning near the square that's pretty warm." The idea of a 4-year-old child sleeping on the street caused a knot in Montgomery's stomach. Agnes looked at him with a pleading expression, clearly hoping he would offer a more humane solution. Montgomery's internal conflict intensified. Part of him wanted to keep his distance, to protect himself from the risk of becoming attached to someone again. But another part, a part he thought had been dead since the loss of his wife, was screaming at him to do the right thing. "You can stay here tonight," he said finally, the words coming out of his mouth before he could reconsider them. "Just for tonight." The smile that lit up Willow's face was worth all the fears that haunted Montgomery's heart. Agnes sighed in relief, knowing that her boss had made the right decision, even if he didn't know the consequences it would bring. That night, While Willow slept in one of the guest rooms, something changed in the atmosphere of Blackwood Manor. The silent halls seemed less oppressive, the shadows less threatening. But along with this new light, old secrets began to stir in the foundations of the house, as if the girl's presence had awakened ghosts that had been sleeping for years. Montgomery spent hours awake, looking out the window of his room and questioning the wisdom of his decision. He didn't know that, a few feet below, in a part of the house that few knew about, someone else had also noticed the child's arrival and was starting to make plans that would change everything. The first rays of sunlight that entered the guest room window found Willow already awake, watching the cat that was sleeping peacefully in a makeshift basket beside her bed. The girl had spent the night listening to strange sounds coming from somewhere in the house, as if someone was walking through the halls or dragging furniture on distant floors. At 4 years old, Willow possessed a keen hearing, developed during her nights on the streets of Savannah, where any noise could mean danger or opportunity. Barefoot, she left the room and began to explore the hallways of the mansion. The house was even more impressive in the daylight, with its high ceilings decorated with plaster moldings and walls covered in dark green wallpaper that gave the environment a solemn air. Old portraits of stern-faced people watched her from their gilded frames, creating a feeling that she was being watched by ghosts from the past. Agnes found her in the dining room, where Willow was standing in front of a particularly large portrait of a middle-aged man with a grey moustache and a severe expression. "Who's this Mr.?" Willow asked, pointing to the painting. Agnes hesitated for a moment, as if the question had caught her off guard. "That's Mr. Blackwood's father, August Blackwood. He built this house many years ago." "He looks mad," Willow observed, with the typical honesty of children. "Why are there so many pictures of people who look mad?" The question made Agnes smile sadly. "People didn't smile in photographs back then, dear. It was customary to make serious expressions." Willow nodded, but continued to study the painting intensely. There was something in those painted eyes that bothered her, a hardness that reminded her of the look of some people on the streets that were best avoided. Her childish intuition captured nuances that adults often ignored. Montgomery appeared in the dining room a few minutes later, wearing an impeccable dark suit that contrasted with Willow's casual appearance in her simple clothes that Agnes had washed overnight. The businessman had slept poorly, tormented by confused dreams, where voices from the past mingled with the childish laughter that now echoed through his house. "Good morning," he said, observing how Willow behaved in his formal dining room. The girl seemed completely at ease, as if she had always belonged in that elegant environment. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Willow replied politely. "The kitty is much better today. He even ate a little milk that Mrs. Dubois gave him." The familiarity with which she treated Agnes did not go unnoticed by Montgomery. In just one night, the child had created bonds that it had taken him months to establish when he hired the housekeeper years ago. During breakfast, Willow made an observation that left both adults uncomfortable. "This table is too big for 3 people. Have more people ever sat here before?" Agnes exchanged a quick glance with Montgomery. The dining table, in fact, seated 12 people, and had been the scene of many family gatherings in the past. But in the last 5 years, since the disappearance of Harrison, Montgomery's younger brother, only 2 chairs were used regularly. "Sometimes we have guests over for dinner," Montgomery replied vaguely, avoiding going into detail about the family's past. "What kind of guests?" Willow insisted, whose natural curiosity led her to ask questions that often revealed more than people would like to admit. "Business people," Montgomery said, cutting the conversation abruptly. Willow noticed the change in tone of voice and decided not to push it, but her restless mind filed the information along with other small inconsistencies that she was beginning to notice in the atmosphere of the house. After breakfast, Agnes showed Willow some of the rooms in the mansion, including an impressive library with shelves that went from floor to ceiling, filled with books in English, Spanish, and French. The girl was fascinated by the leather-bound volumes, even though she couldn't read yet. "There are lots of stories here," she said, running her fingers along the spines of the books. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood likes to read a lot," Agnes replied, watching Willow's eyes sparkle with intellectual curiosity. It was at this moment that the first disturbing discovery occurred. Willow, exploring one of the lower shelves, found a half-closed drawer in an antique mahogany desk. Inside it, there were scattered photographs that showed family moments of the Blackwood family over the years. "Mrs. Dubois, you're in these pictures," Willow said, holding up a black-and-white photograph where a younger Agnes appeared elegantly dressed, arm in arm with a man who wasn't Montgomery. Agnes's face paled instantly. The photograph showed her and Harrison during their wedding 15 years ago, a time when life seemed full of possibilities and promises of happiness. "Where did you find this?" Agnes asked, trying to keep her voice calm as she reached out to take the photograph. "It was in this drawer." "Who's this mister with you? He's handsome," Willow said with the innocence of someone who didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships. Agnes took a deep breath before answering. "That was my husband, Harrison. He's not here anymore." "Did he travel?" Willow asked, noticing the sadness in the housekeeper's voice. "Something like that," Agnes murmured, quickly putting the photograph away and closing the drawer. "How about we go see how the kitty is doing?" But Willow had noticed more photographs in the drawer before Agnes closed it, and her curious mind registered that there was something strange about the housekeeper's reaction. Why would a photo of her own husband make her so nervous? During lunch, the atmosphere in the house changed when Montgomery received a business call that left him visibly disturbed. Willow, who was playing quietly with the cat in the corner of the room, overheard fragments of the phone conversation. "No, Harrison's documents from that time cannot be reviewed. That was settled years ago. I don't care what the auditors are saying." The name Harrison caught Willow's attention, and she immediately associated it with the man in the photograph with Agnes. Her ability to connect seemingly disconnected information was surprising for a child her age. When Montgomery finished the call, Willow approached him with the spontaneity typical of children. "Mr. Blackwood, is the Harrison you talked about on the phone the same one who was in the picture with Mrs. Dubois?" The question hit Montgomery like a lightning bolt. He didn't expect that a 4-year-old child would be able to make that connection so quickly. Agnes, who was serving coffee, dropped the cup on the floor, where it shattered into several fragments. "How do you know about Harrison?" Montgomery asked, his voice laden with a tension that Willow immediately perceived. "Mrs. Dubois showed me a picture of him in the library," Willow answered honestly, without understanding why her response had caused so much discomfort. Montgomery and Agnes exchanged a loaded look. There were secrets between them related to Harrison, secrets that a curious child could inadvertently expose with her innocent questions. "Harrison was my brother," Montgomery said finally, choosing his words carefully. "He used to live here, but he moved away a few years ago." "Where did he move to?" Willow asked, tilting her head with genuine curiosity. "Far, far away," Montgomery replied, an answer that technically wasn't a lie, but that hid a much darker truth. That afternoon, while Montgomery was in business meetings, Willow convinced Agnes to show her more of the house. They explored the second floor, where there were rooms that clearly hadn't been used in years, covered with white sheets that gave the furniture ghostly appearances. It was in one of these rooms that Willow made her second disturbing discovery of the day. While Agnes was tidying up some things, the girl found a folder of documents forgotten in an old dresser drawer. Even though she couldn't read, she recognized the name Harrison, written on several sheets. "Mrs. Dubois, why are there so many papers with your husband's name on them?" she asked, flipping through the documents with curiosity. Agnes turned around quickly and saw Willow holding contracts and financial documents that dated back to the time when Harrison was still active in the family business. Documents that contained irregularities that had been the cause of many conflicts between the brothers. "These are old work things," Agnes said, taking the papers from Willow's hands with a haste that didn't go unnoticed by the perceptive girl. "But if he moved far away, why did he leave his work papers here?" Willow insisted, her childish logic highlighting inconsistencies that adults preferred to ignore. Agnes was silent for a long moment, struggling between the desire to protect the child's innocence and the need not to raise more suspicion with obvious lies. "Sometimes people leave things behind when they move," she said finally, but her voice trembled slightly. Willow nodded, but her penetrating gaze suggested that she wasn't completely convinced. The girl was beginning to realize that there were layers of truth in the house that the adults didn't want her to discover. That night during dinner, Willow made an observation that chilled Agnes and Montgomery's blood. "I heard footsteps upstairs last night, but you told me that only the two of you live here." The silence that followed was tense and revealing. Agnes stopped chewing, and Montgomery froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. The house, which should only house 3 people, clearly had more secrets than it seemed. "It must have been the house pipes," Montgomery said quickly. "Old houses make a lot of noises," but Willow knew the difference between the sound of pipes and human footsteps. Her nights on the streets had taught her to identify sounds with deadly precision. Someone else was in the house, and for some reason, the adults didn't want her to know that. As she prepared to sleep that second night in the mansion, Willow decided that she would investigate the noises on her own. There were mysteries in that house that her natural curiosity couldn't ignore, and she was beginning to suspect that the truth about Harrison was much more complicated than Montgomery and Agnes wanted to admit. Outside the room, Agnes and Montgomery spoke in whispers in the hallway, unaware that the girl was awake and listening to every word through the slightly open door. "She's asking too many questions," Agnes said, worried. "Children are naturally curious," Montgomery replied, but his voice carried a tension that contradicted his reassuring words. "What if she finds out about—" "She won't find out," Montgomery interrupted. "She's just a child." But as they talked about how to keep their secrets safe, Willow smiled quietly in the dark. She had already discovered much more than they imagined, and she was just beginning to put together the pieces of a puzzle that would change the lives of everyone in the mansion forever. Willow's third dawn in the mansion brought with it a discovery that would change everything. The girl had waited patiently until she was sure that Agnes and Montgomery were asleep, before quietly leaving her room. The cat, which had already fully recovered, followed her through the dark hallways like a faithful companion on her mission to unravel the secrets of the house. The footsteps she heard every night seemed to come from somewhere on the lower floor, in a direction opposite to the areas of the house she knew. Willow went down the main stairs carefully, avoiding the steps that creaked, a skill she had developed during her nights of survival on the streets of Savannah. It was then that she discovered a discreet door hidden behind a heavy curtain at the end of the hallway leading to the kitchen. The door was ajar, and a faint light emanated from inside. Willow approached cautiously and heard something that left her completely paralyzed, the voice of a man whispering softly, as if he was talking to himself. "How much longer is it going to take?" the voice murmured. "She can't keep pretending she doesn't know where the documents are." Willow's heart pounded in her chest. There was someone else in the house, just as she suspected. Someone who was hidden, someone about whom Agnes and Montgomery were deliberately lying. Gathering all her courage, she peeked through the crack in the door and saw a narrow staircase that descended into what appeared to be a cellar or basement. The light came from a dim lamp at the bottom of the stairs, and she could distinguish the silhouette of a man sitting in a chair. Willow made a decision that would change the course of everything. With the quiet determination that characterized her, She began to descend the stairs, holding firmly to the cold iron railing. Each step seemed to echo in her ears like thunder, but she continued, driven by an irresistible need to discover the truth. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a small basement with damp stone walls and a musty smell that was reminiscent of abandoned places. A man of approximately 40 years old was sitting in an old armchair, reading documents by the light of a lamp. When he looked up and saw her, both were equally shocked. "Good heavens!" the man whispered, letting the papers fall from his hands. "Who are you? How did you get here?" Willow studied him with her perceptive eyes. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't immediately identify. He was too thin, with a grown beard and clothes that seemed to have been worn for a long time, but his eyes had a gentleness that reassured her. "I'm Willow," she said with her characteristic honesty. "I'm living upstairs with Mr. Blackwood and Mrs. Dubois. Who are you?" The man stared at her with an expression of total disbelief. "You're living with Montgomery. How is that possible?" "I found a hurt kitty in the yard, and they let me stay," Willow explained, approaching him without fear. "Do you live down here?" The man laughed bitterly, a joyless sound that echoed off the stone walls. "You could say that, yes, for a long time." It was then that Willow made the connection that would change everything. Looking more closely at the man's face, she recognized the features she had seen in the photograph in the library. "You're Harrison!" she exclaimed, her eyes widening with the discovery. "You're Mrs. Dubois' husband, who was supposed to have moved far away." Harrison closed his eyes for a moment, as if the innocence of the child's revelation was more painful than any physical torture. "Yes, I'm Harrison Blackwood, and no, I didn't move far away." "Then why did Mrs. Dubois and Mr. Blackwood say that you moved away?" Willow asked, her natural curiosity overcoming any sense of danger that the situation might present. Harrison looked at the girl for a long moment, seeing in her an innocence that had long since disappeared from his own life. "It's a very complicated story, little one. A story you shouldn't know." "I like stories," Willow said, sitting on the floor in front of him with the naturalness of a child who had learned to adapt to any situation. "And I'm good at keeping secrets." Harrison studied the girl's face, seeing in her a maturity that was surprising for her 4 years. After months of isolation and loneliness, the presence of a genuine and unmalicious child was like a balm to his tortured soul. "Your brother Montgomery is keeping me down here," he said finally, deciding that the truth was less dangerous than the lies that might arise. "For almost 2 years. Willow processed the information with the seriousness of an adult. "Why would he do that?" "Because I discovered things about the family business that he didn't want anyone to know. Things that could destroy the company that our father built." The girl nodded, as if the explanation made perfect sense. Her life on the streets had taught her that adults were capable of behaviors that seemed inexplicable to children, but that always had complex reasons behind them. "Does Mrs. Dubois know that you're here?" she asked. "Yes," Harrison replied, his voice laden with sadness. "She brings me food. She didn't have a choice." "Why didn't she have a choice?" Harrison hesitated before answering, struggling with how much of the truth he should share with such a young child. "Montgomery found out that Agnes had done some irregular things when she worked at the company years ago. Small things, but enough to ruin her reputation if they were discovered. He uses that to keep her quiet about my situation." Willow absorbed the information, her sharp mind connecting dots that adults often missed. "So you're both trapped, you down here and her up there." The simplicity with which she summarized the situation surprised Harrison. "You're very smart for a 4-year-old girl." "My mum always said that I paid attention to things," Willow said, referring for the first time to the parents she had lost. "She said it would keep me safe." "Where are your parents now?" Harrison asked gently. "They're gone," Willow replied, with the naturalness with which children accept tragedies they don't yet fully understand. "That's why I was on the street when I found the kitty. Harrison felt an immediate connection with the girl. Both were, in different ways, prisoners of circumstances beyond their control, dependent on the kindness and decisions of others for their survival. "Willow," he said, choosing his words carefully, "it's very important that you don't tell Montgomery that you found me. It wouldn't be safe for me, and maybe it wouldn't be safe for you either." The girl nodded solemnly. "I promise. But are you sick? You look very thin." The genuine concern in her voice touched Harrison's heart deeply. "I'm okay under the circumstances. Agnes takes care of me as best she can." "And the papers you were reading? Are they important?" Harrison looked at the documents scattered beside him. "Yes, very important. They're evidence of the irregularities I discovered in the family business. I'm trying to organize them, find a way to—" He stopped, realizing that he was sharing dangerous information with a child. "To escape," Willow completed, showing once again her ability to understand complex situations. "Something like that?" Harrison murmured. At that moment, they heard footsteps on the upper floor. Agnes was moving around, probably on her nightly rounds to check if everything was in order. "You need to go back to your room," Harrison whispered urgently. "If she finds out you've been here, it could create problems for all of us." Willow got up, but before leaving she did something that surprised Harrison completely. She approached him and gave him a quick but sincere hug. "I'll be back," she whispered. "You shouldn't stay alone down here." Harrison was moved by the spontaneous gesture of affection. It had been a long time since he had received genuine affection from someone, and the simplicity of a child's hug touched him more deeply than she could imagine. Willow climbed the stairs silently, closed the discreet door behind her, and returned to her room undetected. But her mind was buzzing with the discoveries of the night. Now she knew the house's biggest secret. Harrison was alive, was a prisoner in the basement, and both Agnes and Montgomery were involved in a web of lies and blackmail that maintained the entire situation. The next day, during breakfast, Willow observed Agnes and Montgomery with completely different eyes. Every gesture, every word, every look exchanged between them now had a much darker meaning. She noticed how Agnes discreetly prepared an extra tray of food, how Montgomery constantly checked if the doors were locked, how both avoided talking about certain areas of the house. "Mrs. Dubois," Willow said during lunch, deciding to test her new knowledge indirectly. "Why are some doors in the house always closed?" Agnes almost choked on her food. "They're just storage, dear. Places where we keep old things that we don't use anymore." "But I hear noises coming from there sometimes," Willow insisted, watching the adults' reactions closely. Montgomery and Agnes exchanged a quick but revealing look. They were clearly concerned about the level of attention the girl paid to the details of the house. "Old houses make a lot of noises," Montgomery said, repeating the explanation he had used before. "You shouldn't worry about it." But Willow had already decided that she wouldn't settle for vague explanations. That night, she would visit Harrison again, and together they would begin to plan a way to expose the truth that would change everyone's lives in the mansion forever. What she didn't know was that Montgomery had begun to suspect that her presence in the house was carefully destabilizing the balance of secrets he had built over the years, and that he was beginning to consider more drastic measures to protect his interests. As Willow innocently played with the cat that afternoon, dark plans began to form in the mind of a man who had lost the ability to distinguish between protection and control, between necessary secrets and unforgivable crimes. The following days in the mansion became a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where Willow needed to balance her need to help Harrison with Montgomery's growing distrust. The girl had visited the basement 3 more times, always bringing small pieces of food that she managed to hide during meals, and sharing with Harrison everything she observed about the house's routines. During these nightly visits, Harrison had shared shocking details about his situation with her. He recounted how he had discovered that Montgomery was diverting money from the employees' pension funds, using fake accounts and forged documents. When he tried to confront his brother, Montgomery first tried to bribe him, then threaten him, and finally decided to keep him in captivity to avoid the exposure of his crimes. "I have all the evidence organized," Harrison said during one of his whispered conversations with Willow. "But I need a way to deliver it to the authorities without Montgomery finding out beforehand." Willow, with her intelligence sharpened by the need for survival on the streets, suggested something that surprised Harrison. "What if we could get Mr. Blackwood to confess everything in front of other people?" "How would a 4-year-old child do that?" Harrison asked, impressed by the audacity of the proposal. "I overheard him talking on the phone about an important meeting that will be held here at the house next week. People from the company and from town will come for dinner," Willow explained. If they found out the truth at that meeting, Harrison realized that the girl had elaborated a surprisingly sophisticated plan. "Willow, that would be very dangerous. Montgomery wouldn't hesitate to hurt you if he found out that you were sabotaging his plans." But Willow's determination was unwavering. "I can't leave you trapped here forever, and Mrs. Dubois is suffering too." It was then that the twist happened that would change everything forever. The next morning, Montgomery announced during breakfast that he had made a decision about Willow's future. "I found a family in Atlanta who is willing to adopt her," he said, avoiding looking directly at the girl. "They have a farm and can give you a better life than this." Agnes dropped the coffee cup she was holding, her eyes filling with immediate tears. "Mr. Blackwood, she's so happy here with us. Why—" "The decision has been made," Montgomery interrupted with a coldness that chilled the atmosphere. "Tomorrow morning she leaves for her new home." Willow remained silent, but her mind worked quickly. She knew that Montgomery had discovered something about her nightly activities and was trying to get rid of her before she could cause more problems. What he didn't expect was that a 4-year-old child would have the courage to confront him directly. "I don't want to leave," Willow said calmly, surprising both adults with her firmness. "I like living here. I like Mrs. Dubois, I like the kitty, and I like all the people who live in this house." The last part of her sentence was deliberately ambiguous, but Montgomery immediately caught the implication. His eyes narrowed as he studied the girl's face. "What people?" he asked slowly. "Well, there's you, Mrs. Dubois, me, the kitty," Willow began to enumerate innocently, "and the mister who lives in the basement." The silence that followed was absolute. Agnes turned pale as a ghost, and Montgomery got up from the table with an expression of controlled fury that would frighten any adult. But Willow faced him without flinching, her bravery fueled by the knowledge that she was doing the right thing. "How do you know about that?" Montgomery asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I hear the footsteps every night," Willow replied with devastating honesty. "And last night I went down to see who it was. Mr. Harrison is very kind. He told me about the important papers he has stored." Montgomery felt his world collapse. A 4-year-old child had discovered and exposed the darkest secrets of his life in a matter of days. But what really terrified him was Willow's next revelation. "I also told some people in town about Mr. Harrison," she said calmly. "When Mrs. Dubois took me to buy clothes, I talked to the lady in the store. I said I had met a very handsome mister who was living in hiding and who had important stories to tell." Willow's lie was so convincing that even Agnes believed it. In reality, the girl hadn't told anyone anything, but her intuition told her that the threat of public exposure would be more effective than any direct confrontation. Montgomery realized he was cornered. If Willow had really spread the information around town, it was only a matter of time before someone came to investigate. And if he tried to silence her now, it would only confirm their suspicions and intensify the attention on the mansion. "What do you want?" he asked, recognizing that he had completely underestimated the child's intelligence. "I want you to let Harrison out of the basement," Willow said simply, "and I want to keep living here with you." At that moment, as if he had been summoned by the conversation itself, Harrison appeared in the dining room. He had decided that it was time to face his brother, inspired by the courage of a 4-year-old girl who had risked her own safety to help him. "Hello, Montgomery," he said, his words laden with 2 years of suffering and renewed determination. Montgomery recoiled, shocked to see his brother out of the basement. "How did you—" "Willow gave me the courage to stop hiding," Harrison replied, walking to the dining table where they used to gather as a family before everything fell apart, "and helped me realize that I have enough evidence to expose all your crimes." The final confrontation between the brothers was intense, but not violent. Montgomery, realizing that he had lost all control of the situation, finally collapsed. The weight of 2 years keeping his brother prisoner, the guilt for the financial crimes, and the constant pressure of keeping so many secrets had taken its toll. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said, tears finally welling up in his eyes. "After Dad died, I felt so much pressure to keep the company running, to prove that I was worthy of the inheritance. When you discovered the irregularities, I panicked." Harrison watched his brother with a mixture of anger and pity. "You destroyed our family, Montgomery, destroyed Agnes's life, and you almost destroyed an innocent child." "I know," Montgomery murmured. "I know." The most surprising revelation came when Agnes, finally freed from the fear that had controlled her for years, confessed that she had been secretly documenting all of Montgomery's activities, creating her own archive of evidence as a form of protection. "I knew that one day this would all come to light," she said, trembling with the emotion of finally being able to tell the truth. "I have records of everything, all the visits to the basement, all the threats, all the irregularities I witnessed." In the days that followed, the truth was finally exposed. Montgomery, facing the inevitability of justice, decided to cooperate fully with the authorities. He confessed all his financial crimes, explained how he had kept Harrison in captivity, and accepted the consequences of his actions. Harrison, after recovering physically and emotionally from his ordeal, discovered that his documents and Agnes's evidence were sufficient to not only expose Montgomery's crimes, but also to recover all the embezzled money and return it to the affected employees. The biggest surprise of all came when Harrison, grateful for the courage and loyalty that Willow had shown, expressed his desire to adopt her officially. "You saved my life in a way that goes far beyond the physical," he said to the girl. "You gave me back hope and the courage to fight for justice." Agnes, finally free from the threats and blackmail that controlled her, revealed that she had always dreamed of having a family. "Willow brought light to this house in a way that I never thought was possible," she said, with tears of joy in her eyes. The end of the story brought redemption for everyone involved. Montgomery, after serving his sentence and making full restitution of the embezzled funds, found a form of peace through genuine remorse and volunteering with underprivileged children of Savannah. Harrison transformed the family business into an employee cooperative, ensuring that the crimes of the past would never be repeated. He remarried Agnes in a simple but emotional ceremony in the mansion that had been the scene of so much suffering and that had now become a symbol of redemption. Willow, now officially part of the Blackwood Dubois family, grew up in the mansion surrounded by the unconditional love of her adoptive parents. Her courage and determination at 4 years old became legendary in the town of Savannah, inspiring other children to believe that even the smallest can make a difference in the world. The girl who had followed an injured cat into the gardens of a mysterious mansion had managed to do more than save an animal. She had saved an entire family and restored justice in a situation that seemed hopeless. Years later, when Willow became a young lawyer dedicated to the protection of human rights, she always remembered that the greatest transformations often begin with small acts of courage and compassion. The cat she saved, now old and lazy, still accompanied her every day, a constant reminder that following our instincts of goodness can lead to extraordinary changes. Blackwood Manor became not only a home full of love, but also a community centre where underprivileged families of Savannah found support and hope, proving that places marked by pain can be transformed into sources of healing and renewal when touched by the transformative power of genuine love and justice. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.